Have you ever held onto something so tightly that even when it started to hurt, you couldn't let go? We think letting go means losing, but what if I told you that sometimes the pain isn't in the falling, it's in the resisting? There's a strange paradox in life. The more we grip what we fear losing, the more we lose ourselves in the process. In this video, we won't talk about how to move on in theory. We'll walk through the soft, painful, sacred process of actually doing it. Not by pushing the pain away, but by sitting with it, breathing with it, and learning to gently loosen the rope you've been holding for far too long. Somewhere in this journey, we'll meet a monk, a mother, a leaf falling in silence, and perhaps a version of yourself you've forgotten how to love. If you're ready to step into stillness with me, press subscribe and join this journey, not as a viewer, but as a friend walking home to their heart. Part 1. The rope in your hand. I used to think letting go meant giving up. To release something, someone, some version of myself, felt like failure, felt like betrayal, felt like weakness, and so I held on, like a child gripping the rope of a balloon, afraid that if I let it go, I would lose the only color in my sky. Even when the rope burned, even when my hand bled, even when I could barely breathe from the strain, I kept holding on, because we're taught that if we let go, we'll fall apart. But no one ever told us that holding on can break us just the same. Imagine this. You're standing on a riverbank. There's a rope tied to something floating downstream. You don't know what it is anymore. Maybe it was a dream, maybe it was a person, maybe it was a version of you that no longer fits. The water's pulling, the current's strong, but you don't let go. And every second that passes, the rope digs deeper into your palm. You cry, you scream, you pray for peace, but still you hold on, until the pain in your hand is greater than the fear of letting go. This isn't just a metaphor. It's a quiet truth so many of us live through in silence. We hold on to toxic relationships, not because they nourish us, but because the idea of being alone terrifies us. We hold on to jobs that drain our soul, because we fear the unknown more than we fear misery. We hold on to expectations we no longer believe in, identities that no longer fit, and regrets that serve no one, because we think letting go will erase who we are. But the Buddha once said, "You only lose what you cling to." I didn't understand that teaching until my own hands began to shake. There was a time, maybe like yours, when I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake, playing the same conversation over and over in my head, rewriting it, regretting it. I kept asking myself, what if I had done more? What if I had loved better? What if I never let them go? But here's the twist no one prepares you for. Sometimes you didn't let go. Sometimes you were dragged by your own longing, by your refusal to accept, by the illusion that if you held on just a little longer, maybe, just maybe, it would go back to how it was. But everything in this life is moving, even the things you try to freeze with your fear. The Buddha called it anicca, impermanence. Everything arises, everything fades. The breath you just took is already gone. The person you used to be, already a memory. The thing you're clinging to right now, it's dissolving even as you grip it tighter. But we resist, because it hurts to watch something beautiful leave, because it hurts even more to admit that we are not in control. One night, I was sitting outside a small rural temple. It was quiet, the kind of silence that hums like a lullaby. There was a single candle flickering beside the Buddha statue, and right beside it, a monk, no older than 20, sitting cross-legged in meditation. I asked him, softly, "How do you let go of something you're afraid to lose?" He didn't open his eyes. He just smiled gently and said, "You don't let go of the thing. You let go of the fear." That stayed with me, because I realized I wasn't holding on to them. I was holding on to the fear of being without them. I was holding on to the fear of regret, of guilt, of meaninglessness. I wasn't clinging to a person. I was clinging to my idea of what life should have looked like. The rope wasn't tied to them. It was tied to my illusion. And maybe so is yours. Maybe what you're holding on to isn't the job, the relationship, the identity, the dream. Maybe it's the fear of the space that would be left behind. But the truth is, Letting go isn't losing, it's returning. Returning to your breath, to your body, to this moment, to yourself. And so the question is not, how do I let go? But, what am I afraid will happen if I do? Because if you can sit with that fear, not escape it, not judge it, just sit, you'll find that fear is not as heavy as it seems. It's just a shadow of love, a reminder that you once cared deeply, and caring is beautiful until it becomes a chain. Part 2. The gentle unraveling. Have you ever tried to untangle a knot when you were frustrated? Your fingers tug harder, the threads tighten, and somehow what could have been undone with patience becomes a mess you can't fix. That's how we often try to let go, by forcing it, by shaming ourselves for not moving on fast enough, by saying things like, I should be over this by now. Why am I still thinking about them? Why can't I just stop feeling this way? But the path of the Buddha was never about pushing emotions away. It was about sitting with them, softly, gently, as if holding a crying child in the dark. The mind, when hurt, doesn't need punishment. It needs presence, not judgment, but warmth. And that, my friend, is the beginning of real letting go. One morning in the monastery, I watched an elderly monk make tea. His movements were slow, deliberate, like the leaves themselves were sacred. He didn't rush, didn't multitask, didn't try to get to the point, just poured the water, watched the steam rise, waited. I asked him later why he took so much time. He smiled and said, when you're present, nothing is wasted. Even waiting is full of life. I think about that a lot, because when we're in pain, we want to rush toward relief. We want to be done with the grief. We want to feel light again. But letting go isn't a single act. It's a series of surrenders. Sometimes 100 tiny ones in a single morning. Surrendering the urge to call them. Surrendering the story that replays in your head. Surrendering the way your heart still leaps when you hear their name. Each of these surrenders is a thread loosening. Not ripped, not cut, just loosened until the knot softens on its own. So if you're still hurting, still remembering, still waking up with that ache in your chest, you're not doing it wrong. You're just in the process. And the process is sacred. There's a story in the Buddhist tradition of a woman named Kisa Gadami. She lost her only child. In desperation, she went from house to house, begging for medicine that could bring him back. The Buddha told her, bring me a mustard seed from a home where no one has known death. She searched everywhere, but every house she entered held a story, a mother, a brother, a friend, a love, and she returned, not with a seed, but with the realization that she was not alone in her pain. Grief became her teacher, and from it she awakened. This is the kind of letting go the Buddha speaks of, not forgetting, not denying, but seeing clearly that all beings suffer. And in that shared truth we soften, we breathe, we begin again. Maybe what you're holding is heavy because you're carrying it alone. Maybe your grief, your fear, your longing, they just need a little space to speak, not to fix them, just to be with them. Like a candle sits quietly in a dark room, doing nothing, but still giving light. Sometimes that's all you need to do. Be with what hurts. Be with the ache. Be with the part of you that's still scared. Not to get rid of it, but to stop running from it. Because peace doesn't always come from pushing something away. Sometimes it comes from turning toward it and saying, I see you. I'm not leaving you. Even if you never go away, I'll stay. That is what compassion looks like. Not toward others, but toward yourself. And often, it is the first real act of letting go. Part 3. The person you're becoming. There's a strange moment after the storm passes, when the winds settle and the rain stops, but the silence feels unfamiliar. You've spent so long bracing for the next wave, the next collapse, the next goodbye, that when calm finally arrives, you don't know what to do with it. You almost miss the noise, because at least you knew how to survive it. That's the paradox of healing. We crave peace, but sometimes we fear it more than pain, because peace asks us to be someone new, To stand without the story we've always told ourselves. To live without the identity built on wounds, blame, and survival. So, who are you when you're not hurting anymore? Letting go, truly letting go, doesn't just leave a void. It reveals a space. And in that space, you begin to meet someone you may have forgotten. Yourself. Not the self shaped by how others treated you. Not the self that wore masks to be loved. Not the self who bent and broke to be accepted. But the self beneath all of it. The self that breathes quietly. The self that never left. I remember a day, months after I had let go of someone I once thought was my forever. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't checking their name. I wasn't hoping they'd come back. But I also wasn't quite myself yet. I was in between, like standing in the doorway of a house I hadn't chosen, afraid to step inside. And then I did something small. I went for a walk, alone. No music, no phone, just me and the wind brushing past the trees. And for the first time, I noticed the color of the leaves again, how they rustled, how the light moved through them. I noticed I had returned. No one clapped, no one announced it, but something shifted inside me. I was no longer walking to escape. I was walking to arrive. And that too is letting go. Not just of the person or the past, but of the version of yourself that needed to hold on so tightly. We change when we stop chasing who we were, and we soften when we start welcoming who we're becoming. But growth isn't loud. It's quiet. It's in the moment you delete the message you used to rewrite 100 times. It's in the silence you no longer need to fill. It's in the breath you take without thinking of them. And slowly, that rope in your hand is not even there anymore. The Buddha once said, "As a snake sheds its skin, we must shed our past over and over again, not to forget it, but to allow what is old to fall away so something new can emerge. Just like the tree lets go of its leaves each autumn, not in anger, not in fear, but because it trusts the spring will come." So ask yourself, what version of you is ready to be released? The one who always apologizes just to keep the peace? The one who believes love must be earned through suffering? The one who defines their worth by their usefulness to others? You don't have to carry them anymore. You can thank them, bless them, and then gently let them rest. Letting go isn't always about who you're releasing. Sometimes it's about who you're finally letting in. And that person is you. Part 4. The space we're afraid of. What if it's not the loss that hurts the most, but the emptiness it leaves behind? That echo, that silence, that feeling like there's now too much space in your heart and you don't know what to do with it. So many of us hold on, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of the quiet, fear of the unknown, fear of starting over, fear of being no one. We'd rather sit in discomfort that's familiar than walk into a peace that's uncertain. We say we're afraid to lose them, but maybe we're afraid of who will be when they're gone. That fear is real. Let's not pretend it's not. In Buddhism, it's called bhaya, the primal fear that arises when our ego dissolves, when the self we thought we were begins to vanish. And the Buddha didn't tell us to run from it. He told us to sit with it, to breathe with it, to watch it like a candle watches the darkness. Not fighting it, not judging it, just being there. Because when we sit with fear, it begins to soften. It reveals its true form. Not a monster, but a messenger. One day, a monk asked the Buddha, "Why do I feel so much fear when I try to let go of my attachments?" The Buddha replied, "Because your attachments have become your identity. Letting go feels like death, but it's only the death of the illusion." That shook me the first time I heard it, because we don't just let go of people. We let go of who we were with them. We let go of the story, the imagined future, the version of ourselves that only made sense in that context. And that feels like erasure, like disappearing. But in truth, it's a clearing, a space. And space, though frightening at first, is the cradle of becoming. Imagine a garden overrun by weeds. You pull them out, not because you hate them, but because they don't belong anymore. And for a while, the soil looks bare, empty, exposed. But in that nakedness, something begins to breathe. something begins to wait, something begins to bloom. The same is true for your heart. It might feel barren after you let go, lonely, uncertain, but the teachings remind us nothing grows without space, and space is not absence. It is potential. So if you're in the in-between, the blank page, the quiet after the storm, trust it, sit in it, don't rush to fill it. Letting go is not about replacing, not about filling the silence with distractions. It's about allowing the space to speak, to whisper. This is where your real life begins. Part 5. The peace that was always there. Somewhere along the journey of letting go, you stop asking, when will this end? And begin wondering, what is this moment trying to show me? That's the shift. Not sudden, not dramatic, just a gentle softening, a loosening of the jaw, a deeper breath, a walk with no destination. It happens quietly, like mist lifting from the mountain at dawn. And in that stillness, you begin to realize something profound. Peace was never gone. You were just too entangled to feel it, like the sky always there, but hidden by clouds we thought were permanent. Grief, fear, clinging, the storms of the mind. But storms pass, not because we push them away, but because we stop fighting the weather. The Buddha once said, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. And I used to hear that and think, that's nice, but how? How do you find peace when your heart is broken, your future uncertain, your past still haunting? The answer came not in words, but in presence. One morning during a silent retreat, I sat beneath a Bodhi tree, eyes half closed, not meditating well, just sitting, tired, breathing, existing. And in that space where I wasn't trying to be wise or spiritual or enlightened, I felt it. Not joy, not relief, just stillness. The kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't announce itself with fireworks. Just a gentle quiet inside, like the sound of a bell after it struck, fading but still holding something sacred. It wasn't that all the pain had vanished. It hadn't. It was still there, like low thunder far off. But it wasn't me anymore. It wasn't consuming me. It wasn't the center of who I was. I had become the sky, the space around it, and the storm was just weather. That's the gift of letting go. Not the disappearance of pain, but the revelation of peace beneath it. A peace that doesn't depend on who stays or who leaves. A peace that exists beyond titles, achievements, or identities. A peace that is simply the truth of being. So what if peace was never a destination? What if it's not something to be reached, but something to return to? Not in the future, not someday, but right here, in this very breath, in this sip of tea, in the way sunlight touches the wall at 4 p.m. Letting go doesn't guarantee peace. It simply makes space for it to be felt. And when you stop filling every quiet with noise, when you no longer need to outrun the past, you begin to feel something ancient within you rise. Not ambition, not validation, not even healing, just being. And that, perhaps, is the highest peace of all. Part 6. Loving yourself after letting go. No one really talks about what happens after the letting go. Not the dramatic part, not the heartbreak, the tears, the confusion. We talk about that often. But what comes after the storm? The calm? That awkward silence of you with you? I used to think that once I let go of the person, I would feel free, and I did. But then came something quieter, something harder to name, a strange emptiness. And then, beneath it, a realization. I had no idea how to be with myself. Because here's the truth few of us are taught. When you've spent years trying to prove your worth through others, through pleasing, fixing, performing, surviving, letting go means you no longer have a mirror to reflect yourself in. And that's terrifying. Not because you're not whole, but because you never learned how to recognize your own reflection. The Buddha once said, "You, yourself, as much as anyone in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." But most of us don't believe that. Not really. Not in the quiet. We think love must be earned. Through perfection. Through sacrifice. through being useful. So when we stop clinging, when we finally release the rope, we're left face to face with someone we've long ignored, ourselves. It's awkward at first, like meeting a stranger, like sitting down to tea with someone you never gave a chance to speak. But slowly, if you stay, if you breathe, if you don't run away, something begins to thaw. Maybe it's when you light a candle for no reason. Maybe it's when you whisper it's okay to yourself at 2 a.m. Maybe it's when you smile at your reflection without fixing your hair.
Ting moments.
Fleeting, but they matter. I remember one morning, I made breakfast just for me, not to post it, not for someone else, just for me. And I sat, and I ate slowly, and I said, in my mind, I'm sorry I made you earn everything. And something in me exhaled. Part one didn't even know was clenched, softened. That's the beginning of self-love. Not the loud kind, not the treat yourself kind, but the kind that sits beside you in the silence and doesn't ask you to change. The kind that says, you're not broken, you're just tired, and you don't have to be anyone else today. Letting go is hard, but loving yourself afterward, that's the deeper work, because it's easy to fill the void with something new. Harder to sit in it and say, this space is mine now, and I'll fill it with gentleness. So tonight, if you find yourself alone, don't rush to fill the silence. Light a candle, breathe in, breathe out, and say to yourself, softly, like a lullaby, I'm here, I've got you, I'm not going anywhere. That's not just healing, that's homecoming. Part 7. The ending is not the end. There's something quiet that happens when the dust finally settles. Not victory, not ecstasy, but a kind of stillness you didn't know your heart was capable of. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer fighting yourself. Letting go doesn't mean you've forgotten. It doesn't mean the pain never mattered. It means you've stopped letting it define you, like a scar on the skin. Still there, still visible, but no longer sore to the touch. You've carried it long enough. Now it's simply part of your story, not the title. There's a Zen story of a monk carrying a woman across a muddy path. Though his tradition forbade contact with women, he helped her cross, then walked on. His younger companion stayed quiet for hours. Eventually, he burst, "Why did you carry that woman? We're not supposed to touch them." The elder smiled. "I put her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" That's what many of us do. We carry things long after they've left our hands. We replay conversations. We hold on to resentment. We rehearse regrets like rituals. But at some point, the weight isn't theirs. It's ours. And we must ask, what am I still carrying that no longer belongs to me? Letting go is the art of putting it down, of honoring what was, and stepping gently into what is. And when you do, something strange happens. The world doesn't change, but you do. You move slower. You breathe deeper. You smile for no reason. Because now, peace isn't something you chase. It's something that lives inside your chest, like a quiet bird finally returning to its nest. So if today you find yourself at the edge of release, with trembling hands and a heart that doesn't know if it's ready, know this: you don't have to rush. You don't have to do it perfectly. You don't even have to feel healed. You just have to be willing. Willing to loosen your grip. Willing to sit in the silence. Willing to trust that you won't fall apart. Because the truth is, you're not falling. You're being set free. And as you step forward, you'll realize something beautiful. The end of one thing is often the beginning of becoming who you were meant to be. Moon viewing ceremony, the rope is no longer in your hand. Your palm remembers the pain, but it also remembers that it let go. And now, you are light enough to rise. So, you've come all this way, through the ache, the silence, the loosening of the grip. And maybe now your hand still trembles, but it's open. And that's where healing begins. You don't have to feel ready. You don't have to forget. You only have to remember you are more than what you lost. Like a tree shedding leaves in autumn. Not in defeat, but in trust that something new is already waiting within. If something in this story touched a place in you, I'd love to hear it. Was there a rope you let go of? Or one you're still holding? Leave me a word, a sentence, or just a breath in the comments. Because this isn't just a video. It's a space for soft landings, for coming home. And if you'd like to keep walking together, subscribe to Lotus Light Teachings, where every week we untie a little more and return to the stillness that never left us.